Here is the full, detailed, and objective true story of King Farouk I of Egypt and Sudan, a monarch whose life was a dramatic tapestry of indulgence, political intrigue, and ultimately, tragic downfall. King Farouk, the tragic boy, king who lost a throne. The story of King Farouk is not just a biography of a man, it is the story of the end of an era. He was the last reigning monarch of the Muhammad Ali Dynasty, a symbol of a dying feudal system, and a central player in the final act of British colonial influence in Egypt. Farouk was born on February 11, 1920, at the Abdin Palace in Cairo, the only son of King Fuad Doribir and Queen Nazli. From the moment of his birth, he was coddled, pampered, and isolated in immense luxury. He was the heir to a vast fortune and the throne of a nation that, while nominally independent, was still under heavy British military and political influence since 1882. His education was designed to prepare him for kingship. He was tutored by an assortment of European instructors and was notably placed under the stern guardianship of the Englishman captain, later Major General, Allweigel, who tried often in vain to instill discipline in the young prince. Farouk was sent to England to study at the Royal Military Academy, Woolwich, in 1935. The sudden accession, on April 28, 1936, his father, King Fuad died unexpectedly. The 16-year-old Farouk, still a minor studying abroad, was suddenly the king of Egypt and Sudan. The country was governed by a three-man regency council until he came of age. The beloved king, a hopeful beginning, 1936 to 1939. Farouk returned to Egypt in 1936 to a nation brimming with optimism. He was young, handsome, and seen as a refreshing change from his stern, autocratic father. His early public appearances were masterclasses in public relations. He spoke fluent Arabic, unlike Fuad, who preferred Turkish or French, visited mosques and bazaars, and showed a common touch that endeared him to the masses. He was hailed as the blessed king and the hope of the nation. Politically, his accession coincided with the signing of the 1936 Anglo-Egyptian Treaty, which slightly loosened Britain's grip, limiting their military presence to the Suez Canal zone, but far from granting full sovereignty. This treaty was initially popular, and Farouk benefited from the nationalist sentiment. In 1938, at 18, he officially assumed his constitutional powers. That same year, he married the beautiful and elegant Safinaz Zulfikar, a commoner of Egyptian and Turkish descent, who was renamed Queen Farida. The marriage was a national celebration, and the couple, seen as the perfect royal pair, had three daughters, Farial, Fawzia, and Fadia. The lack of a male heir would later become a significant point of contention and personal sorrow for Farouk. The Descent, Indulgence, War, and Conflict, 1939 to 1945. The outbreak of World War II was the catalyst for Farouk's decline in popularity and power. While the Egyptian government officially broke relations with the Axis powers, Germany and Italy, under British pressure, Farouk and many Egyptian nationalists were deeply sympathetic to the Axis. Pro-Axis sympathies. Farouk and many officers in the Egyptian army saw the Axis as a potential hammer to break the British imperial yoke. He kept the Italian minister in his palace after Italy declared war, maintained secret contacts with Axis agents, and was reportedly delighted by early German victories. This put him on a direct collision course with the British ambassador, Sir Miles Lampson. The Ultimatum of 1942. In February 1942, with Rommel's Africa Corps advancing towards Alexandria, the British feared Farouk would appoint a pro-Axis prime minister. Lampson presented the king with an ultimatum: appoint the pro-British Wafd Party leader Mustafa el-Nahas as prime minister or abdicate. To emphasize the point, British tanks surrounded Abdin Palace. This humiliating event, witnessed by his staff, broke Farouk's spirit. He capitulated, but his prestige as a nationalist king was shattered forever. The Egyptian army, particularly a young officer named Gamal Abdel Nasser, saw this as the ultimate national disgrace and never forgave the British or the king for his weakness. Personal decadence. Simultaneously, Farouk's personal life spiraled. His marriage to Farida deteriorated. They divorced in 1948, and he became notorious for his gluttony, womanizing, and compulsive kleptomania. Stories of his all-night gambling sessions elaborate feasts and theft of valuable trinkets from state guests, including Winston Churchill's pocket watch, became legendary. He amassed one of the world's largest collections of pornography and owned a vast array of cars and red light district properties. He was increasingly seen as out of touch while the majority of Egyptians suffered in poverty. The Unraveling, Corruption and Revolt, 1945 to 1952. The post-war period saw Egypt's problems come to a boil. The Palestine disaster. Egypt joined the disastrous 1948 Arab-Israeli War. The Egyptian army performed poorly, and the defeat was blamed on the government and, by extension, the palace, which was accused of supplying the army with faulty, corruptly procured weapons. Rampant corruption. The palace was seen as the epicenter of a corrupt system where government contracts were bought and sold. Farouk's circle of cronies, known as the Royal Cabal, was deeply unpopular. Rise of opposition. The Muslim Brotherhood grew in power, and nationalist fervor, now aimed squarely at the monarchy and the British, found a home within the Free Officers movement, led by Nasser and Naguib. The final trigger was on January 25, 1952, when British troops attacked an Egyptian police barracks in Ismailia, killing 50 officers. The next day, Black Saturday saw Cairo burn as rioters, likely instigated by the Brotherhood, destroyed symbols of Western influence, nightclubs, hotels, and bars, while the government and the king did nothing. Farouk was at the races, the coup and abdication, July 1952. The chaos of Black Saturday was the final proof for the free officers that the old regime was bankrupt. In the early hours of July 23, 1952, they launched their almost bloodless coup. The military, led by General Mohammed Naguib, the figurehead, and the real architect, Lieutenant Colonel Gamal Abdel Nasser, swiftly took control of Cairo. They surrounded the royal palace in Alexandria, where Farouk was summering. Realizing he had no support from the army, the people, or even the international community, the US quickly recognized the new regime. Farouk had no choice. On July 26, 1952, aboard the royal yacht Marusa, he signed the instrument of abdication in favor of his infant son, Ahmed Fuad II. In a poignant and humiliating ceremony, he was forced to salute the new Egyptian flag as he and his family set sail for exile in Italy. His final departure words, reported by the press, were, "There will be another day. The army has surprised the world with its betrayal." Exile and death, 1952 to 1965. Farouk settled in Rome, living initially in a grand villa and continuing his life of luxury, gambling, and womanizing. He married a commoner, Nariman Sadek, in 1951, just before the revolution, in an attempt to produce a male heir, which he did. However, the marriage quickly fell apart in exile. His life in Italy was a sad parody of his former glory. His immense wealth was gradually depleted by his extravagant lifestyle. He became a bloated, tragic figure, often photographed in cafes or casinos. On March 18, 1965, at the age of 45, he collapsed and died at a restaurant in Rome after a characteristically massive meal. The official cause of death was a heart attack, though rumors of assassination by poison persisted. He was buried in Cairo in the Al-Rifai Mosque near the tombs of his ancestors. King Farouk's legacy is complex and largely negative in Egypt, where he is remembered as a corrupt, gluttonous playboy who betrayed his nation's aspirations. He is the archetype of the decadent monarch who lost touch with his people. However, a fuller picture reveals a tragic dimension. He was a product of his gilded cage, utterly unprepared for the immense political pressures of his role. He inherited a nearly impossible situation, trapped between British imperialism and rising Egyptian nationalism. The 1942 humiliation broke him, turning a potentially reformist king into a cynical and indulgent one. Ultimately, Farouk's story is a classic Greek tragedy. He was a young man thrust onto the world stage with immense power and potential, only to be undone by his own flaws and the irresistible tides of history. His abdication didn't just end his rule, it ended a 150-year dynasty and closed the book on monarchy in Egypt, ushering in the modern Republican era.